At 12 years old, Ethan Miller had only $1.37 in his pocket. It was supposed to be his lunch money. But when he saw an old homeless man sitting outside a small diner, shivering in the rain, Ethan stopped. The man did not beg. He did not ask for food. He simply sat there, holding a cardboard sign that said, "I'm just tired." Ethan looked through the diner window. Warm soup, fresh bread, people laughing. Then he looked at the old man again. And without saying much, Ethan walked inside and spent every penny he had. He gave the man a bowl of soup. The old man looked up and asked, "Why would you help me, son? You clearly don't have much." Ethan smiled softly and said, "Because my mom says hungry people shouldn't have to explain why they're hungry." The old man stared at him for a long time. Then he whispered, "Remember this day, Ethan." But Ethan had never told him his name. 20 years later, after losing his job, his home, and almost all hope, Ethan received a letter from a lawyer. Inside was a key, a photograph, and a truth that would change his life forever. Ethan Miller grew up in a small town in Ohio. His mother, Grace, worked 2 jobs. In the morning, she cleaned rooms at a motel. At night, she washed dishes at a restaurant. She was always tired. Her hands were always dry and cracked. But somehow, she still smiled every time Ethan came home from school. They lived in a tiny apartment above an old laundromat. The walls were thin. The heater barely worked. And every winter, Ethan slept wearing 2 sweaters. But Grace never let poverty make their home cold. She would say, "Ethan, we may not have much money, but we can still have a rich heart." Ethan believed her. At school, he was quiet. He wore secondhand clothes. His shoes were always a little too small. Some kids laughed at him. They called him Laundromat Boy. But Ethan never fought back. He knew his mother was doing her best. Every morning, Grace gave him lunch money. Not much, usually $1 or $2. Sometimes only coins. And every morning, she kissed his forehead and said, "Spend it wisely." One rainy Thursday afternoon, Ethan was walking home from school when the sky turned dark. Rain poured down so hard that people ran into stores for shelter. Ethan pulled his jacket over his head and hurried down Main Street. That was when he saw him, an old man sitting beside the diner. His clothes were soaked. His beard was gray. His hands trembled from the cold. Beside him was a cardboard sign. It did not say, "Please help." It did not say, "Need money." It only said, "I'm just tired." For some reason, those 3 words hit Ethan harder than anything he had ever read. He stopped walking. People passed the old man without looking. One woman even stepped around him like he was trash on the sidewalk. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. He reached into his pocket. $1.37. His lunch money. He had not eaten all day, but the old man looked even hungrier than he felt. A few minutes later, he carried the hot soup outside with both hands. The old man looked up. Ethan placed the bowl in front of him. "I thought you might be cold." The man stared at the soup, then at Ethan. "Is this yours?" Ethan shook his head. "It's yours now." The old man's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you help me, son? You clearly don't have much." Ethan smiled. "Because my mom says hungry people shouldn't have to explain why they're hungry." For a moment, the old man could not speak. Then he whispered, "What's your name?" "Ethan." The old man lowered his eyes. "Remember this day, Ethan." Ethan froze, because he had answered after the man said his name. At least, that was how he remembered it. When Ethan got home, his mother noticed immediately. "You didn't eat lunch, did you?" Ethan looked down. Grace sighed. "Ethan, I bought soup for someone." His mother became quiet. "For who?" "An old man outside the diner. He looked really cold." Grace sat beside him. She did not scold him. She simply held his hands. "You were hungry too." Ethan nodded. But he looked like he had been hungry longer. Grace's eyes softened. "That kind of heart will cost you sometimes," she said. "But don't lose it." That night, Grace split her own dinner with him. Half a sandwich each. No complaints. No sadness. Just love. Years passed. Ethan never saw the old man again. But he never forgot him. Ethan grew older. He studied hard. He earned a scholarship to a state college. His mother cried the day he left. Not because she was sad, but because she had spent years praying her son would have a better life than hers. Before Ethan got on the bus, Grace held his face in her hands. "Promise me something." "Anything, Mom. No matter how high you climb, don't look down on people who are still on the ground." Ethan smiled. "I promise." And he meant it. For a while, Ethan's life seemed to rise. He graduated, got a good job in Chicago, rented a small apartment, sent money home to his mother every month. He was not rich, but he was stable. And for a boy who once counted coins for lunch, stable felt like a miracle. Then everything changed. His mother got sick. At first, she said it was nothing. Just fatigue. Just age. Just too many years of working too hard. But the diagnosis was serious. Ethan left Chicago and moved back home to take care of her. He spent his savings on hospital bills. He took freelance jobs. He slept in waiting rooms. He watched the strongest woman he knew become smaller every week. One evening, Grace looked at him from her hospital bed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "Don't say that. I wanted to leave you more. You gave me everything." Grace smiled weakly. "Then don't waste it." Those were some of the last words she ever said. After she died, Ethan felt like the world had gone silent. He returned to work, but he was not the same. He missed deadlines. He stopped answering calls. Eventually, he lost his job, then his apartment, then his confidence. At 32 years old, Ethan Miller found himself sleeping in his car behind a closed grocery store. The boy who once fed a homeless man was now one bad week away from becoming one. And the hardest part was not hunger. It was shame. He avoided old classmates, ignored messages, stopped looking in mirrors. One cold evening, Ethan sat in his car holding his mother's old photo. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I tried." Rain began to fall against the windshield. And suddenly, Ethan remembered the old man outside the diner. The sign, the soup, the words, "I'm just tired." For the first time in years, Ethan understood exactly what that meant. 3 weeks later, Ethan received a call from an unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Is this Mr. Ethan Miller?" "Yes. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm an attorney. I've been trying to reach you regarding a private estate matter." Ethan frowned. "I think you have the wrong person." "I don't believe so. Did you grow up in Brookhaven, Ohio?" Ethan sat up. "Yes." "Did you once help a man outside Helen's diner when you were a child?" Ethan stopped breathing for a moment. "How do you know that?" "There is a letter for you, and something you need to receive in person." The next morning, Ethan drove to a law office in Columbus. His clothes were wrinkled. His shoes were worn. He almost turned around twice. But he went inside. The attorney, Mr. Hayes, greeted him respectfully. Not with pity, not with judgment. Respect. That alone almost broke Ethan. They sat in a quiet conference room. Mr. Hayes placed a small envelope on the table. "This was left for you." Ethan opened it. Inside was a photograph. It showed a younger version of the old homeless man, clean-shaven, wearing a suit, standing in front of a large factory. Ethan looked confused. Mr. Hayes spoke gently. His name was Samuel Whitaker. Ethan shook his head. "I don't understand." Mr. Whitaker was once one of the wealthiest manufacturing owners in the state. But after his wife and daughter died in a car accident, he disappeared from public life. Ethan stared at the photo. He became homeless? For a period of time, yes. By choice in some ways. By grief in others. Ethan looked down. "And I gave him soup." Mr. Hayes nodded. "You gave him more than soup." Then the lawyer handed him a letter. The handwriting was shaky, but clear. Ethan began to read. "Dear Ethan, you were a child when we met. You had almost nothing. I could see it in your shoes, your coat, your thin little hands holding that bowl of soup. But you gave anyway. At the time, I had lost my wife, my daughter, my purpose, and my faith in people. I sat outside that diner not because I needed money, but because I wanted to know if kindness still existed when nobody was watching. Hundreds of people walked past me. Some looked away. Some laughed. Some judged. Then you came. You did not ask what I had done wrong. You did not ask if I deserved help. You simply saw a hungry man and fed him. That day, you reminded me of my daughter. She used to say the world only changes when kind people act before they are rewarded. I looked for you afterward, but your mother asked me not to disturb your life. She said, if you want to honor my son, help someone else first." Ethan stopped reading. His hands began to shake. "My mother knew?" Mr. Hayes nodded. Mr. Whitaker visited her years later. She refused money for herself, but she allowed him to create a trust in your name under one condition. Ethan swallowed. "What condition?" "That you would only receive it when you truly needed it, not when you simply wanted it." Ethan looked back at the letter. "Your mother was one of the finest people I ever met. She did not want wealth to change your heart. She wanted hardship to finish shaping it. So I waited. And now, If this letter has reached you, it means life has brought you low enough to understand both sides of kindness. I am leaving you my house, a portion of my estate, and the old Whitaker building downtown. But I ask one thing of you. Do not use it only. Do not use it only to save yourself. Use it to save someone else too. The world does not need more rich men. It needs more people who remember what hunger feels like. Thank you for the soup. It gave me one more reason to live. Samuel Whitaker. Ethan covered his mouth. For years, he thought that day had been a small moment, a forgotten act, a bowl of soup. But to Samuel Whitaker, it had been proof that the world was still worth staying in. The inheritance was real. Samuel had left Ethan a modest but life-changing amount of money. Enough to pay his debts, enough to find a home, enough to start again. But the building downtown was what caught Ethan's heart. It was old, empty, dusty. The sign outside still read, Whitaker Tools and Manufacturing. Most people would have sold it. Developers offered Ethan a fortune. One wanted to turn it into luxury apartments. Another wanted a private storage facility. Ethan almost accepted. He was tired. He needed security. But one evening, he stood inside the empty building and heard his mother's voice. No matter how high you climb, don't look down on people who are still on the ground. So Ethan made a different choice. 6 months later, the building reopened. Not as apartments, not as offices, but as a community kitchen and job training center. He named it Grace House, after his mother. At the entrance, he placed a framed photo of Samuel Whitaker. Beside it was a small handwritten sign. Hungry people shouldn't have to explain why they're hungry. Every day, Grace House served hot meals. But it did more than feed people. It helped them write resumes. It gave them clean clothes for interviews. It trained them in basic trades. It helped single mothers, veterans, teenagers, widows, and men who had slept in cars just like Ethan once had. One winter evening, Ethan was locking up when he saw a boy standing outside. Maybe 12 years old. Thin jacket, wet shoes, holding a few coins in his hand. Beside him sat an older woman wrapped in a blanket. The boy looked nervous. "Sir," he said, "how much is soup?" Ethan felt his chest tighten. He knelt down. "What's your name?" "Caleb." Ethan looked at the coins in the boy's palm, then at the woman, then back at Caleb. "It's free tonight." The boy's eyes widened. "Really?" Ethan smiled. It was paid for a long time ago. Caleb did not understand. But Ethan did. Kindness is never small. It travels. It waits. It comes back wearing different faces. Sometimes as a bowl of soup. Sometimes as a letter. Sometimes as a second chance. That night, Ethan served Caleb and the old woman himself. And as he watched them eat, he finally understood the lesson his mother had been teaching him all along. You do not need to be rich to change someone's life. You only need to notice them. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the reason someone survives. And sometimes, the person you save today becomes the reason you are saved tomorrow.